Welcome to the Agency Playbook. I am Joe Ems, your host. Today we are going to have some real conversations with real agents so that you can walk away with real insights. We are joined by Richard Sweet from Vantage Point Risk today. Richard has built out some amazing different intakes that he uses to help simplify the data gathering process for his agency, and he's going to share some of that with us here today. Richard, thank you for joining on to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Looking forward to having a conversation.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And being that intake is kind of our sweet spot here, we've had a lot of different conversations about different things. I'm very excited about this one, but why don't we start off with you telling us a little bit about yourself and Vantage Point? I'd love to learn a little bit about that.
Yeah, my background is actually mechanical engineering and business management, and came from building systems and processes through my career. So when I transitioned to insurance back in 2018 timeframe, I brought a lot of that kind of process with me, and um, build systems and look at how we do stuff based on how what I learned from my background. And it was always about, from the beginning to the end, right? How do you manage all that stuff? So that, got a pretty extensive background there. The engineering side of things with Vantage Point Risk, it's a purpose-built agency, predominantly commercial insurance. We do personal lines as well, but a big part of it is commercial insurance. We focus on 6, 7 different specialties, if you will, from real estate investment, trucking, restaurants, professional services. So we have a kind of a wide variety of specialties that we focus on, and which is key when it comes to what we're going to talk about today is the intake method and how you manage that.
Absolutely. And so coming from the background of mechanical engineering, getting into insurance, how did that happen for you? How did you get into the industry?
I mean, it's I had some family situations come up in the late 2012, 2013, and Allstate actually approached me at that time, and my son was about 3, 4 years old, and at the time I was traveling a lot for work, and so it was appealing at that point. But then where I was at in my career, they actually let me transition into a different position that required less traveling. So I stayed where I was at, transitioned more into the sales side of things for what the industry I was in, and was working with a lot of like Western Coast big companies, stuff like that, and I was able to minimize my travel. And then kind of that 2018-19 timeframe, which is kind of when COVID hit, um, kind of had an ultimatum put in place in front of me saying, "Hey, you got to travel more, or you don't have a job." And so I left I'm like, okay, bye. I'm not giving up my family, my son, my time with my son, and all that kind of stuff. And wasn't sure what I was going to do. And then Allstate found out I was not working, and they reapproached me. And I went down the captive insurance carrier way for till what was it June of 2021 when I sold the Allstate agency, and then started Vantage Point Risk up, and just never looked back. So, um, yeah, so kind of not a, there's a lot of insurance agents that inherit the business or they get into it because of the family, and then you always hear the ones that are like some random path into it. But that's kind of how it started.
Yeah.
And I just love that independent channel, being able to do what I want to do and be my own person in my own business.
Absolutely. And it's funny, and we won't focus too much around the conversation around this because it's not the topic of the day, but there are so many people that I speak to that you start off in captive, and then I think you see, grass might be a little bit greener on this side, and over time, a lot of people end up transitioning more into that true independent side. Um, so I think while your way of getting into the industry might be a little bit different, there are a lot of similarities in the end of the day where you kind of ended up. Um, so coming from that background, you said that was a lot that you took into insurance. Some of those processes, do you feel like off the bat you knew that you were going to apply them, or was it over time that you saw some correlations of where you could actually apply what you used in your previous life into insurance?
So I think I didn't recognize the correlation in the beginning. I would say, it's as I learned the insurance industry and how to, like all the steps involved, if you will, on insurance, and then I was able to correlate. I mean, it's correlate it to kind of what I did before, both on the engineering side, the sales side, and the business side. It's not unlike other companies, right? You have your kind of your attract customers, right? How you get them to your business, and then you have your intake side of things, and then after you get them in door and you get their information, how do you get them to sale, right, or buying, and then how do you take care of them afterwards? And the industry I was in, I spent 14 years in the wood products industry building sawmills, and then I transitioned to the waste and recycling world where I built waste and recycling systems. So both of them, you're looking at what comes in the front door. The wood products, you're dealing with trees. What kind of tree? How big a tree? So you got to figure out how to process that. And then waste and recycling, you're dealing with either your recycling products or your trash. And so you have to manage that. And then what's the end goal, right? And how do you make that the most efficient? So as I started understanding the processes more in insurance, I started looking at like, okay, how does all that correlate? And at the end of the day, we're all trying to do more with less, more work, and we're trying to get it through the system, right? Margins go down, commissions go down, and so you're trying to figure out how to do more business, deliver the same end quality product to your customer, and improve the process. And so, we focused a lot on, what's our attract method, advertising, website, social media, and then now that we have them, how do we get them through? How do we get all their information into our systems to make it easy, and we make sure we're getting all the details, right? And there's a lot of options out there to do that, but a lot of them to me are canned options, if you will, right? It's like, okay, here's a form, you fill this out, or on the website side, you get the jot forms or the gravity forms, which are, I mean, you got to have access to your WordPress or whatever website you're using, and then you got to talk to the provider into giving you access to the forms to build, and then you got to know how to do the forms and all that kind of stuff. So that's a big part of it. And then if you're focused on straight personal lines, there's some great options out there. If you're focused on just commercial, Main Street America businesses, there's some great options out there. But then when you throw in specialties like real estate investors or commercial property or restaurants or artisan contractors, or if I said trucking, transportation, professional services, all of a sudden the questions you start having to ask to get the data you need to provide an accurate quote in a timely fashion changes.
Yeah. Yeah, it becomes a lot more complicated. I can't remember off the top of my head, but someone told me just for if you were looking at writing a personal auto versus a commercial auto for an E&S client, the constellation of data points that you need to gather, it's like 10x on the commercial side. Um, and I think anyone who's filled out a handful of 127s and sub apps knows exactly how that goes. But I really do feel that intake goes such a long way in terms of an investment into your agency. But I feel like not too many people fully understand that quite yet. I mean, do you feel that intake is an underrated part of what makes an agency function so smoothly?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, if you don't have a solid intake process, and if you don't have a solid intake process across your whole team, right? I mean, if it's one person sitting at a desk and you can remember every question you got to ask every single time and you write it down, great. But then how do you get that into your systems? And how do you get it to the carrier portals? Then you add another person, right? I mean, it's one thing for you to try to remember all the right questions, but then you ask somebody else that's not as versed in the industry as you are to remember every question to ask. And then you miss stuff, right? And do you get, you get the wrong information, or you don't get enough information, which complicates it because now you got to go back and forth with the customer, and you're calling them or texting them or emailing them, and you're waiting. So your whole process slows down, and let's say you do all this, you don't get all the information, you go back and forth a bunch of times, customer's frustrated, you're frustrated, and you sell a policy for $1,500, you just made $150 and it costs you 4 hours of time. right? That's not an ROI that you want. So intake is a big part that a lot of people skip over because they just want to get to the sale and buying, because the buying is where you make the money. But what happens if the policy's wrong or you don't have the right information and then it gets audited?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's one of the underrated pieces of intake that's so important is, like you're saying, at the point of sale, you want to rush through and get there as soon as you possibly can, right? You don't want to lose that momentum that you have with your prospect. You want to make sure that you close it. But one of the biggest issues that I feel happen are what's going to happen downstream. If you're gathering incorrect information and you have an audit situation, um, I mean, downstream, there's a handful of issues that you can have if the initial intake is going well. Oh, you're right. But yeah, I mean, do you have any thoughts about that? The more downstream side of issues that come along with that?
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, the things that never get shared with our customers, I think a lot of them is the audit side of things on their business, right? A lot of carriers have that option. If you're not collecting that information up front and you don't have good information to verify that you've got every single time, then when the customer gets audited, you have no way to come back and say, well, this is what you gave me, right? We went through this process, whether it's revenue or payroll or number of employees, all that kind of stuff, right? And having that solid, consistent intake process helps save you when you have to go back to the customer and say, this is what you told me, right? Or, like how we use your guys' stuff a lot is like we'll send the customer a link for the certain forms or certain information that we want them to fill out, and then it's audited there. So we know that the customer filled out the information. So that makes a big difference downstream, I think. Not only with the buying process, it helps you with your E&O, but people's memories are pretty bad. What they, not customers' memories, our memories. You know, what I got a year ago from somebody is gonna, they're not gonna remember what they told me. I'm not gonna remember what they told me. So that's a point of argument downstream. And if you can help say like, hey Joe, this is what you filled out and you put on the form, right? This is the information you gave me. Here's our documented trail of it. The customer's like, oh, okay, great.
Yeah,
It's not an argument anymore.
exactly. It's right there. Proof is in the pudding. Um, yeah, I think that initial intake goes such a long way, and in terms of even fostering better relationships with your underwriters, if you can have good, clean submissions, it's going to make life a lot easier. I genuinely feel like the submission quality is determined long before you even write that email to the underwriter sending them over your applications. That's why nailing that initial intake is just so important, and something I feel that all agencies should invest in, but I'm a little biased on that end.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, you got two avenues that we quote by, right? And you either got the carrier portals, so you have your intake to be able to feed that information. But then you're right, like if you get into where you have to submit to an underwriter and you're sending either applications or accords or different information, we often attach our intake form that prints out from the system. Like here is our intake, right? And it's organized based on how we went through it, and I get so many underwriters come back and they're like, that form's awesome. Like, where did you get that? Right. And it's just kind of like, it's a high, I don't want to say, like high level, but it's a detailed form of all the information in one spot that we took over. So there, a lot of underwriters I know, they'll work from that form. They have their accords and they want their accord signed. They want their carrier app signed, but all the information that is on that is also on our form that we've taken in and we've submitted. So a lot of times they'll go based on that because it's more in sync with what they're trying to do versus looking all over the place on different accords.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
accord for them is like checking a box.
yeah. The accords are a necessary evil these days, but if you can have a good system to help simplify that process, it definitely goes a long way in terms of just time saved and the quality of submission you're getting out. Now, diving a little bit more into your intake process and what you've built out there, um, would you say there are certain workflows or pieces of information that you always try to incorporate into what you do with your intake that other agencies might be missing?
Um, I mean, I think one of the things that we've done is we've streamlined it to get all the relevant information we need to pre-fill other information, right? So it may be, I mean, I guess in a way, yes, because it's like, I think a lot of questions like on Accord forms or carrier apps, you don't usually think to ask those until you get to that Accord form, right? Or you don't know you're going to need it, maybe. And so we're asking questions up front that we feel like we're going to need regardless of what direction we go, regardless of if it's going to a carrier portal or to an underwriter. And I mean, I can take trucking and transportation as a good example. We have half of our carriers we can submit online. Geico, Berkshire, those kind of carriers we can submit right online, right? So we get all the information we need on our intake to submit online, but then we also have carriers we have to submit, Accord forms or MVRs. A lot of them I've actually talked to now. I'm like, hey, I just want, we call it a quick quote form. We fill it out and we send it. And it's a 2-page form that gives them all the information on the customer, right? And they're like, yeah, I can give you an indication off of this. And they give us an indication. And they're like, okay, yeah, that's a good indication. Here's the Accords. So we're capturing that information that's needed on the front side that we can pre-fill Accords with, or the carrier apps, just in our process. And I think a lot of people, that's where I get to, like, if not every person is asking the same questions, you never get a complete, you know, submission. And so having that form where they have to go through and fill it out when they're talking to the customer makes a big difference.
Yeah. And with the intakes that you guys have built out, one thing that I often hear with agencies is they feel there's a barrier to entry almost in rolling out their own intake forms because they want to get it perfect the first time. They want to make sure everything is right. But I feel like the agencies that I have seen build out some of the best intake forms, it's evolved over time. Would you say that's happened with your intake process as well?
100%. I mean, you got to, I'll give you a good example. I mean, we used to have on our website, I built a gravity form that hadn't converted over to assembly yet. And it had all the stuff in it, right? But I'm like, okay, I need to get this built in assembly. And it was for homeowners, right? So I built a basic form to capture the basic information so we could start using it. And a couple of my agents came back to me and like, hey, I'm not like, I want to be able to ask this question or that question. Like, I'm getting these questions asked on the carrier portals that I can't answer.
Mhm.
So it's like, okay, go back, update the form pretty quick. Now it's there, right? And so they're asking it. And my team knows because we use it. And a lot of times I'll just jump online with them and make the changes as they're asking for them. So they see how simple it is for me to make a change or addition. And so they know now that if there's something missing that they need to collect on a regular basis, they just let me know, so the feedback's important and we'll jump online and do it real quick. I mean, we updated the whole, we changed it into a personalized intake form. So auto, home, umbrella, RV, right? And built that out custom to what we like. I mean, you guys had a great starting place, but it wasn't like all the stuff that we needed or we wanted, so we're able to kind of customize and build onto ours. And now somebody calls in and we're not using a deck page upload or download type scenario and we have to ask questions, we're capturing all that. And then we also have an option in there, which was really good because they're like, well, I don't need to answer all these questions if they send us a deck page or they do the upload, right? Or we get that information. So it's like there's a checkbox that says deck page received, and it has the conditional logic in there that only asks the other questions we need that's not relevant or on a deck page that we got. That, because otherwise, like Juan was like, man, it takes me forever to get through these pages and I already have all the information, so.
Well, that's awesome. It's great to hear that you guys are using it in that way. And beyond just simplifying the overall intake, simplifying the process of gathering the deck pages and gathering what they can. So, are you guys trying to get deck pages, loss runs, full policies, all of that up front on just about every submission that you're doing?
Not always. I mean, it just depends. It's dependent on the type of risk. It's kind of a, commercial Main Street America type business where you don't need loss runs. then we don't worry about them. We always ask for that information, and try to get it. Some customers provide it, some don't. Um, my philosophy on a lot of that is like, we need information to quote. We want accurate information to quote, but the way our process has streamlined, I want to make it easy for the customer. I'm kind of, in my mind, it's kind of like the Amazon shopping experience, right? You go in and you make it easy. If you put too many roadblocks in the way, then the customer doesn't want to do business with you. If somebody else makes it easier, that's not to say we don't want to get the information, and we don't, and we get the information. But if you're going to be like, I need deck pages every single time before I quote this, if it's a $1,200 bop, you're wasting your time.
Yeah.
In my mind, right? Because the customer's just shopping, right? And customers shop, they don't, I don't know. Much to people in our industries probably don't like to hear this, but people don't want to shop for insurance, right? They're not, it's not their favorite thing to do in the daytime. So if you can make it somewhat painless, then they'll do business with you.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and one of the things that you said earlier is, people have a short memory. I think they also have a short attention span too. So I think nailing the intake to actually boiling it down to making it as quick and painless of a process as you can is going to do a couple of things. It's going to ensure that your client is most likely going to get all the way through that intake. They're going to get you all the information that you need. Then it's going to simplify a lot of the back and forth that you have to do in the end of the day. Have you found that standardizing intake has reduced a lot of that email, phone call, text message back and forth that a lot of agents still struggle with?
yeah, definitely. I mean, the simple things sometimes are the things you forget to do, right? So, like, I know how often, like, I had a new producer, and she'd forget to get the, co-applicant's date of birth, right? So having a simple, clean intake that's the same every single time they're filling out makes a big difference. And then all of a sudden you're not having to call the person back or text them back and stuff. So I would say, since we've been building out our custom intakes and streamlining them, I mean, we've cut the back and forth down probably 60-70% at least, you
That's
know.
incredible.
And
Yeah.
as we get, as I hear about things, I'm like, oh, we need to get that on the intake so we don't miss that next time. So, and I think it's also, I mean, I go back to kind of the niche or specialty markets too. When you have certain industries you target, that's where I think it even gets more important,
Yeah.
because then you can, like my real estate investor portion is, there's certain check boxes in there, like, is this, what kind of loan is this? It's hard money? Is it mortgage? Is it, paid direct? Is it is it government? Like what kind of loan do you need? Because it changes how we handle it, right? Um, certain carriers, like we know on our side, certain carriers only allow pay in full. So it's a question up front. We ask the customers, like, you know, are you paying for this? And it's okay. Is it okay if it's 100% paid in full? Because if they say no, I got to make monthly payments, it knocks a couple carriers out, and it saves us time on the backside. So that kind of stuff makes a pretty big difference when you can standardize that, and it saves you a lot of time. It saves you and the customer a lot of time, because yeah, you send them a quote for one carrier and it's really good price, and they're like, "Oh, I can't pay that all at once. I need a payment plan." Well, now everything else looks a lot more expensive.
Yeah.
So, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's I mean, yeah, it's great hearing what you guys have done, and it's one of those things that I feel like the investment of time that it goes into it, the time that you can get back for yourself and for your team as you start to standardize that and you cut down the back and forth is it's tough for people to sometimes see that the big picture of that. So it's great hearing that that's a process working really well for you guys. If an agency came to you and they wanted to improve their intake tomorrow, where would you tell them to start?
That's a good question. I mean, it's, you got to understand your customers, right, or your prospects, how you're getting them in the door. I think that's a big part that a lot of us don't focus on, because it changes on how you do that. But I think ultimately it's like, look at the lines of business you're selling, track the questions you're being asked, look at your emails back and forth, your text messages back and forth, and see what follow-up questions your team or you are asking for, right? It's pretty easy to go look in if you have a CRM type scenario, it's pretty easy to go look underneath that carrier or that client record and say, oh, look at all these emails back and forth from the customer asking these questions. Look at all the text messages. Like, the producer talked to them, they got their name, phone number, address, and date of birth, but then they forgot to ask these 5 questions about the house or about the business. Track that. I mean, it's the power of AI, right? Throw it in Chat GPT, and say, here's a summary of 10 different client interactions. What are the questions we missed that we need to build an intake form on, right? I don't want to ask things I don't need, but let's make sure we're capturing everything that we do need to get quotes. So you can do that, and that'll streamline it. And then then you go build an intake, and the build to intake part, I think, is what scares a lot of people that aren't technically savvy per se, right? But the way we used to have to do it, like I said, with a drop form or gravity form or another form builder on your website, that's gone. To me, your guys' system is so much easier because you can, I can go in a search query and type something in, and it gives me the options for the form field builder, and I drop it in, drag and drop it, and it's pretty simple. So once you figure out what you need in the process, and the questions you need to do, it's a pretty simple process to build.
Yeah, that was one of the goals for us when we were building out the custom intakes is obviously in the end of the day, we want to make the intake process easy on the clients and the prospects you're working on. But we want to make that also easy on the agents too. So instead of having to go in there and actually type everything out, being able to click a button or filter by risks or filter by forms, it makes it a lot easier on you guys, cuts down that build time a lot. So I'm happy to hear that that's something that you've recognized and it's definitely made an impact on you. Um, Now, in terms of the intakes that you're building, how are you actually using them? Are you mainly using them for the upfront data gathering process? Are you using them at renewals? Or I've seen some people even use intakes for service purposes. Talk to me a little about how you are using the intakes within your agency.
So right now, um, it's, I would say, 90% new business intakes. So um, just started using them for renewals, starting to do stuff. But in all honesty, our intake form for renewals, it's pretty much asking the same questions, right? Um, but I was looking at like starting to build some specific ones that we could attach because it's, you know, we're connected to our CRM, so we can pull the information in, and our AMS, we can pull the customer's information in. How do we build that? But really, it's been intake, and we've customized our intakes based on the lines of business that we do. Um, that's been the big part for us. Um, and then using that information and pushing it to our CRM and then to our quoting platform.
Were you surprised when you guys made the leap to dive more into that intake side of data gathering? Were you surprised by the amount of your clients that were willing to jump in and use the intake? Because I hear that a lot from agents where they would just assume that their clients would never go and do that. They don't want to answer the questions. But did you have a strong response to that from your current clients and the prospects that you have?
So, yeah, it's been relatively well received. So, we treat it a little bit, I don't know if we treat it differently, but what we do is, you know, like our intake forms, I think are more built for us to use, fill out. And
Mhm.
then a lot of times what I'll say, I'll let a client know, it's like, hey, if I need any more information that I need you to fill out, I'm going to send you a link and just select the questions I want you to answer. Right. That there has been pretty big. Right. They're
That's
like, it's not confusing to them. Right. They don't have all this information they're trying to do that you have as an agent know the terminology for. Um, I do have, like, I've had some, I did try to embed a few of the forms in our field on the website. I feel like it was the wrong application just because it was too long form oriented. versus just trying to capture information.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think what the customers like or what they see, it's an online simple form. They can do it on their phone, their tablet, or their computer, and you know, usually it's pretty quick and painless for them. So I think the application process makes they see is relatively easy.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it all boils down onto just making it easier on them as much as you can in the end of the day. Um, but touching on that, I mean, clearly it sounds like on the client experience, there's been improvements there. And then on the team experience, it sounds like they've had improvements as well in terms of the amount of time that they have to spend on something. Would you say that you've seen a greater increase in experience on team side or client side, or just a little bit of both?
Both for sure. I think you know the the customer side, client side, the one we have to ask them questions and we use something where we can check it and send it to them. It's definitely improved that process, and we get comments. Our whole process revolves around kind of technology and making it easier for the client. So the whole process comes into play, and assembly is a big part of that. Like on the intake side, they just like the process. Right? Like you're so easy to work with, right? All across the board. Like you make every step painless, right, and simple for us to go through. And you guys play a big part of that. On the um, employee side, the team side, it's streamlined it to the point where they, like I can have my non-trucking CSR answer a phone call and somebody's trying to get a quote for trucking. He opens the trucking app, the assembly app, and he knows all the questions asked. Right. So they appreciate that because he's not well versed in trucking, but now he has a checklist per se of all the stuff he has to get. And so that's made their life a lot easier versus him going, yeah, let me get your name and information, and I'll have somebody call you back. He can just say, oh yeah, let me get what I need, and if we miss anything, I'll have somebody call you back. But we should be able to get everything we need to quote it. Or my personal alliance producer picks up the phone and somebody's calling about, you know, real estate investment property or an apartment or a commercial building or something like that. She knows she can open that intake form and get all the information she needs, at least 90% of it. And it saves the customer a lot of time. So I think for them, it's made a pretty big difference. Well, I know for them, it's made a pretty big difference in their ability to capture information.
Well, that's incredible. I'm happy to hear that, and that breaking it down into everything happens in that one space. The intake is all boiled down into one location with the same questions for everybody. You could have a brand new producer come in. Maybe they've only ever done personal lines, and they can easily walk through that, which I think is a huge impact. So I'm really happy to hear that that's worked out really well for you guys. Now, jumping into a few questions on the advice that you might have for other agents out there, would you say there are mistakes that a lot of agencies make in the intake process, whether it's in the building of their intakes or the type of data they're trying to gather or how they're trying to go about it? Would you say you've seen mistakes out there or that you've personally experienced that you would caution other agents to?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest mistake is trying to freeform it, or basically not have something to fill out, right? And trying to remember all the right questions to ask. I think that's the biggest mistake a lot of us make. I got a notepad next to me. I'm just going to write down information as I get it from the person. I got to remember to go back. So having a process, and you get this. You'll see this with clients or prospects when they call in. They're like, they want to give you all this information that everybody else has asked for already, right? And then you might forget to ask them about something else that's important to your process. So I think not having a process or not having something to complete on your side is a big miss and the big area that a lot of people miss. And then I think they probably another big thing that happens, and you see this online a lot, is people are like, hey, what do you think about this platform, that platform, and this platform? And they're like three different intake type platforms for different, one's personalized, one focuses on commercial, and one focuses on, I don't know, health insurance, right? And you're like, well, what are you trying to solve? What's the questions? And so they might go buy one, and it's an inexpensive investment for them, but it doesn't work right. It doesn't ask maybe it's the wrong intake for the majority of their business, and so they pay in month after month, $50 a month, and nobody's using it because it's not the right process or right application intake for the type of business they're doing. I think that's probably the second biggest mistake a lot of people make is they hear all the, you jump on a Facebook group or something like that, and you hear everybody talk about this one great company, and yeah, it's not knocking a company. It's the wrong application.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
Fit goes a long way, I think.
yeah,
And then, and just sprinkling in, and you've kind of touched on this before, the other piece that I think ties in with that is the integration side as well. Um, Being able to gather your data in that one place, but not have it locked to that system, and being able to then have that go into your CRM or your management system or wherever you need it to go. Because there are so many people I talk to who they say, I've tried out an intake tool in the past and it was great. We gathered all of this data, but in the end of the day, it would either just be emailed to us in a form, or we would just have it stuck in that site that we were gathering the information on, and you're having to do that manual entry back into your applications or into your management system at the end of the day, which is, as you know, can be quite the headache, and brings you right back to that manual data entry. So I know that's something that's working well for you guys as well.
yeah.
Uh,
I don't like the retype stuff. Yeah. To me, it's. I mean, it slows the whole process down and makes it longer, for your client who didn't want to shop for insurance to begin with to wait for you, right? So yeah, I mean, it. You guys integrate with a lot of stuff. It's for us, it's the intake's the first thing area we touch. We drop it to our CRM, and then we use another tool that helps us with the quoting process. We can drop the downloads that we get from Assembly into that, and then we just go to quote. Right? I mean, it's you know, if it's a 10-minute or 20-minute phone call with the prospect to get the information, typically we're turning quotes around. If it's a standard like carrier portal, like a online personal or Main Street America type business, we're usually turning all our quotes around within an hour. And that's quoting. It starts with the intake being complete, but that's on a personal line for us, that's quoting 8 to 10 different carriers, and same with the commercial lines. So now I don't have a friend in Southeast that down in Georgia like that. They have like 23 home and auto carriers they got to quote with. So it might take them a little bit longer, but the if you get the right applications and the right information, it speeds up that entire side of it.
Yeah, that's incredible. I love hearing the turnaround time that it takes for certain people, because I think you're right. Based off where you are, it can vary a little bit, but that is awesome to hear that you guys can quote with that many carriers that quickly, turn those quotes around. Um, I love hearing that. That's great.
Yeah.
Now, in
Well,
terms,
and like I said, the non-surplus or the standards, non-standard stuff, most of our carriers will take our application and give us an indication.
yeah,
So they'll take our intake form, which is branded to our agency and everything, and we can send it saying, "Hey, I got this risk," and it could be trucking, it could be property, it could be whatever. And here's the intake form we took in. Here's the basic details of the company, the risk, and can you quote this, and can you give me an indication? So that's one form that we send to everybody.
yeah, it's cool. The way that you guys are doing that is really cool to me. I mean, it's almost like that intake, that initial intake you're doing. It's like your first underwriting meeting. It's like that's where you're gathering all of your field underwriting information, and instead of having to go back and deal with all those forms, you guys have fostered those relationships with your underwriters where you can just get that right back over, which in the end of the day is going to save you so much time, and just make that process a lot easier. So it's awesome hearing what you guys have done there. In terms of where intake is right now, so it sounds like you guys have been on an intake journey for a little while, and you've seen different iterations of it that you've tried within your own agency. Where do you think the intake process is headed in the next 3, 4, 5 years?
That's a it's an interesting question. So I don't I would say with the advent of how fast AI is tools are building and the way things are building, I think it's hard to predict 3 years down the road. I think it's hard to predict 18 months, to be honest with you. You
Yeah.
know, um, I know you guys, like other businesses, you have to kind of take things. You can't you can't implement so quick that things are changing all the time, right? But um, I mean, I see intake. I don't know if this is like what I see or what I want. So, you know, good feedback maybe, but let's play out a role, right? A customer calls me and I'm on a conversation. I'm looking at my intake form. I'm just asking questions, right? I'm not typing anything, right? And I'm on the call going through the questions I got to ask. Customers answering them. When I'm hang up that phone call, it's downloading the AI transcript and dropping it into that and building my apps for me and building my intake form, right? And then you're taking that intake form and pushing it to the carriers for quotes. That's where I think that's where I want it to go. Right.
I'll say
That
this.
might be 3 or 5 years down the road, Joe, but you know, that's a
I'll, I'll say this. We're not far off.
yeah.
we're, we're getting there. We've had some
But
initial conversations, and it's something that we're looking to do ourselves. So
I mean, when you look at the time frame it takes, when you look at an agency and the and the carriers aren't cutting commissions dramatically, but they've cut them, right? And it's and you look at that whole like you know up to buying process. How do you streamline that with automation processes that help make your life easier or make the customer's life easier, and then help the agency do more business and be able to support themselves and keep the business, right? And so I think that intake, one, you got to attract everybody. You get them there. How do you get the time frame from intake to buying down? And I think that's the key going forward for people like in your role. It's like, how does Simly? You had a great intake product. You have a great product, to be able to submit apps and the AI upload and all that stuff works great. How do you take it to that next step? So potentially it doesn't even leave your system.
yeah, yeah. I think that's the goal, and kind of as you said, as AI gets better, and beyond that, APIs get better as more industries and companies become API friendly with sharing data back and forth. That helps that a lot too. Um, so some things I think are going to come a little bit sooner than later. Some I think we have to wait on the adaptability of certain companies out there and just seeing how they feel about things. But I think where your head's at in terms of that overall idea of just speeding up the intake to bind process, um, we're absolutely going in the right direction there. Not just us, but many different companies out there. Now, one last question here. So, as someone who's started an independent agency, and especially I think this is a fun question with the background that you've had. For if someone was starting a brand new scratch agency, how much would you say to invest into process or versus people for those early days agents that are just kind of starting off?
I mean, I think I think investing in process and figuring out how to do the things yourself so you can have things set up for the people when they come in is important. Um, the challenge you have with that, it's kind of, I mean, it's a double-edged sword, and because I see this in my agency, and we're very process software dependent. Is you got to hire people that understand it. If you have more than certain, if you don't have everything in one spot, that's the hard part, right? And it goes back to what we were just talking about. Where does everything live? But I think if you, I don't know, it's a hard question, Joe. I mean, it's like I think process, technology, and everything like that. If you can invest the time and energy into that, it'll help you as one person, for instance, be more successful and get more work through the door, right? But you got to build it in a way that when you bring somebody in that's not as um, educated or understanding or invested in it, the processes, that they can still work. because that's what happens now. It's like people, solo agency owners build this stuff and then they try to hire somebody, and I've had this issue, and they don't understand it and they don't use it, and then the whole system breaks down, right? Or you get a bigger agency that maybe they have 50, 75 employees, and the higher ups try to drive the technology and the processes, and it doesn't hit well, and the same thing happens. They don't use it, right? So it's not benefiting anybody.
Yeah, I mean the one it sounds a little chicken or the egg. I feel like this question, right? But the one thing that I think you've done well that you mentioned today is it sounds like you build your process around your people and you make it easy to make changes. Like if someone comes to you and says, "Hey, there's a question that's being asked here, but we didn't see that in the intake that we're using," you can very easily go and build that into the process.
I think part of it is, making sure your team has, if you when you bring people on or you implement something, everybody, you got the buy-in, right? And they know that the feedback is accepted, and you whether the feedback is implemented is one thing, but the feedback is accepted, and you guys talk it through and figure out what's the best process, or because sometimes people will be like, I just don't like the way that works, and it's like, well, this is the best thing because of this, right? Whatever our agency and process we have to go through, right? Um, so they understand that and they give you feedback. So I think regular feedback from a team is important on the processes when you're using stuff.
Yeah. And then one closing question here, just because we've talked a lot about assembly, and I know that you used softwares in the past that helped to solve a similar problem. But what would you say the problem was that assembly came in and solved for you, and how implementing that into the agency has worked for you and your team?
I mean, there was a few things. One of them was the ability to upload documents that we had from wherever and parse it out and start to build the application, right? So whether I had a deck page or an email or an Excel sheet or whatever, I could upload that into you guys' system, and I wasn't having to type it in, and retype it. So I could upload that. That was probably the biggest thing for us. Second part was, I mean, it goes to one of our conversations earlier. It's like streamlining platforms, right? So I could build intakes, and it's built into the system, the one system that we're using versus a Gravity or a Jotform off the website that then emails you the information, or having to use Zapier to get it into agency, the CRM type stuff. So there was that aspect of having an intake that we could utilize there and then customize it. Um, and then just, I think the kind of agency branding ability to send out, you know, form fields basically to a client asking them for more information. I think that was a part of it too. But I think the AI upload and the condensing of intake into one area made a pretty big difference for us.
Happy to hear that, and I appreciate you giving the good feedback here. Well, that wraps up our time for today. Richard, thank you so much for coming on and joining us for this episode. I really appreciate you having on, and I think you had some great insights here.
Cool. Thank you. I appreciate the time.
Of course. Thank you, everybody, for joining in, and we'll see you on the next episode.